I am Cosmin Popan. I am working on a project that deals with the working conditions of platform food couriers. I think the last couple of years have witnessed a lot of these workers being increasingly visible in the public space, and probably even more so with the pandemic, when they have been described as essential workers, but then there's a lot of lack of knowledge and understanding with regards to what these working conditions are about. So there's a lot of discussion about how these jobs are flexible, how you can be your own boss, and this is what you find oftentimes in public discourses, in the media, and also in the communication strategies of this company. But then stories in the media have started to appear probably again as these services became more popular, and you could still see that actually there are stories of exploitation, there are stories of actually not the most appropriate working conditions. And obviously that kind of felt the need to explore more in depth what these working conditions are about. So I have done this research now for 2 years. I have 3 years of research, and I have done this, as I was saying, in Manchester and Cluj. And effectively, I have been doing ethnographic work, field work, working as a courier myself for Deliveroo and Uber Eats here in Manchester, for Glovo in Romania, and now probably for Deliveroo and Uber Eats again in Lyon. This exhibition actually is drawing on some of these more in-depth conversations and relationships I have managed to forge with some of these couriers, which I have followed at work. And here you have 10 such stories, 5 from Cluj and 5 from Manchester, of couriers that I have followed closely. And then their stories, there are some images, footages that I have produced. I then worked with 4 illustrators to then produce these illustrations for the purpose of engaging a broader audience, to understand a bit, each and every one of us, what actually happens when we press a button on Deliveroo or Uber Eats and we expect everything to happen quick and the food to be hot and arriving on time, and what is actually the work behind this dot moving on the map to get you the food.
I want to understand how they want to be represented, and so I was able to see who were their favorite superheroes, what their favorite comics, and especially when it was done remotely as well, I was able to message and talk with them as well. So yeah, it changed the process a lot when they saw my work, and they were a little surprised by some of the things that they'd seen. I could then adapt and change so it suited what they wanted, and I've trained as a visual anthropologist, so that relationship is very important to me. And this was quite difficult to put together because in an ethical way, he went through, you'll see in the work, a very difficult time. He was accused of something that he didn't do, but then I was very wary of representing him, me as a white man representing a black man that was also saying that he was accused by a white woman of something of rape, and that was quite tricky. And the amazing thing about this is that I was able to meet him, and I was able to talk with him and to get a sense of his character.
I've been aware that there's potential exploitation of workers and maybe conditions haven't been so great. So it's something I've been interested in finding out a little bit more about it, to see the kind of lived experiences of people involved in the sector. I guess with some of the more newsworthy headlines over the last few years, I got this sense that there was some sort of collective action going on amongst delivery people, but it doesn't seem to come across that that's the case, particularly with these groups. So maybe this sense of being in the kind of area together and being able to collectively bargain doesn't really filter through to people who are working on kind of isolated jobs.
It's quite interesting to see the workers' viewpoint, the workers' takes on their experiences of this. As a researcher, I'm kind of very interested in the kind of platform politics of these gig economy workers and the companies behind them, their kind of business models and their own terms and conditions, which they don't really talk about. I don't think they publicise. So hearing it from people who have been doing research and actually participating as workers themselves in that research is particularly fascinating.
Most of the times you would see these couriers on the streets and they would be men, and within this context of very gendered workforce, there are still women doing deliveries. And in Manchester, one of such couriers I have spoken with, and who's a girl, it's Bianca, that we wanted very much to protect her identity. Then for somebody who's a girl and does deliveries, there are different other vulnerabilities that are there that you don't necessarily come across if you're a man doing these jobs. And one such thing is the fact that she might get attacked and that she might need to carry, indeed, as she does here, a pepper spray that she was given by a relative just because they realized and they thought that she should carry a pepper spray with her. So that was something that fortunately she didn't have to use, but it kind of describes the additional vulnerabilities that these workers are, and also the times of the day when she decides to go at work, for example, are quite interesting to consider, because evening time is the busiest. But then if you are a woman, you might not want necessarily to work at late hours in the evening as the man would do. And also just generally being a woman in a gendered workspace doesn't get you very far with getting various tips that men would share in various groups or encounters where as a woman you don't necessarily have access. So I think we wanted to explore her story and to explore and to think about the various additional layers of vulnerability and precarity that this work might bring to the table whenever you are a woman, and obviously as a migrant as well, because also she's a migrant. And what does this mean when you have all these intersectional layers of vulnerability and precarity?
Something that I didn't realise, which I think one of the images back there just showed me how unsafe some drivers or some delivery personnel feel while out and about, and maybe having to take protective measures to protect themselves, like the use of pepper sprays.
I didn't know about how the violence had impacted them, and how there was quite a lot of knife attacks, especially in Manchester, which was quite surprising to hear about. And obviously know about knife attacks happening, but you didn't particularly think that they would be targeting these kind of people.
It was quite astounding to hear about the violence that the drivers and riders were subjected to. I could understand. I mean, there's a few times as a pedestrian, I've had run-ins with drivers that don't comply with the particular regulations around pavement usage, but I'd never fully anticipated that would come out as violence, and they would become the victim of organised groups of cycle and motorbike thieves, which I was quite surprised by. I didn't realise that kind of thing was taking place. And it was equally interesting to hear about the police response to them. I mean, again, we're in this terrible state of austerity where, there are no police for responding to really any crime, but just to find that they could be quite so casual about these labourers, I guess, just reinforced their position of who they are and where they're recruited from socially.
So I've kind of worked adjacent with it, working in fast food places. So I've been on kind of the other side of it, providing the food for the couriers. It backs up a lot of what I thought, and I think it details kind of the specifics that were there that kind of fill in the stories that I've been around and seen before, but not gathered fully the intensity of the actual work as a courier. I think you struggle with the ethics of it, because in the sense, if the services themselves are bad, then you could say, oh, I don't want to support that service, and therefore, on the other side of things, couriers aren't getting orders and can't support themselves if that's the job that they're working in. So the ethics of that are quite problematic as a consumer on that side of things.
Hazim is one of the couriers I have been following at work. Actually, I was not following him at work because he's working on a motorcycle. His story is, to an extent, the standard story of somebody who does deliveries. He's a migrant, he's a young adult who does this job probably for longer than many others are doing it. So he's been in the job for 2 years now. And in Manchester, he started off as many couriers do, by doing deliveries on a cycle. Before then, this gets to be a more serious full-time job that they do. So eventually he switched to a motorcycle, as you can see here, that allows him to do more deliveries, particularly outside the center, which has become at a point, particularly during the pandemic, very busy with couriers. So now he used to use this motorcycle to go long distances outside the city center, Withenshaw and all South Manchester, where being on a motorcycle makes a bit of a difference, actually. At the same time, as many couriers that I have been speaking with, he ends up, as you can see here, doing what they call multi-upping, because oftentimes there's not enough orders on one platform. They would choose to work 2 platforms at the same time, 3 platforms at the same time. Another courier I just spoke with, he says that he does 4 platforms at the same time. So that means that they can pick up an order for, say, Uber, and then at the same time get another order from Deliveroo, and they would need to actually have a very good understanding of the city and be very skillful in what they do, actually, in order to be able to maximize their earnings, because they would do these 2-3 orders at the same time, and they would need to make sure that they deliver it on time, that everybody's happy, and they make enough money to cover up for the dead periods in a day where they don't get jobs. Also, this means that this can be a very tricky skill to possess and to make use of, because obviously there's the apps that you have to constantly monitor and to make sure you look at the maps and the comments and notifications you get on the app, but also the traffic itself. And when you're on a motorcycle, that thing which is very fast, actually, you need to make sure that you are very careful of what's happening around you. So what I'm trying to say here is that this skill that is the multi-upping skill that some of these couriers possess, and that's something that attracted me to Hazim's story, is precisely this idea that they are paid little money, actually, also because there's this understanding that it's an unskilled job, when it's exactly the contrary.
So when looking at the artist like exhibition and how that the illustrator has designed these, so obviously some of them have done digitally, so more on an iPad, whereas some of them are physical, like actual paintings and drawings that people have done. I think actually seeing it and reading the captions underneath the work has really helped me to understand the story more. And
I like the graphic representation, so it gives you a better idea of somebody's day-to-day experiences on the job. Even though they're based in different countries, some people come across the same issues.
It opened my eyes to what the gig work economy is and how it impacts different people in very different ways. And so I feel like I am coming from a point of privilege, right? I get to see these stories. I get to have a very outside perspective of what they're doing, and then I get to make some work that then is shown, and I get the benefit of having that. And so I think it's been a very humbling process to get to meet them and to talk with these delivery riders, and I've learned so much through that process.
When we're trying to tell stories, we want to do it in a kind of as universal a format as possible. We want to tell stories in ways that are going to engage young and old, people from different backgrounds, and it's not just the artwork itself, but it's the different types of artwork, that the different ways that we've got use of colour, the use of black and white. These all different ways of artistic expression that will appeal to different people. which hopefully will make even the medium being the same thing, being kind of comic strips, stuff like that, will provide a bit more universality in kind of how that we tell these stories.